Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
For those who know me, well, for those who know me, you know. For those who don't know me, I enjoy the movies. I love going to the movies. I had a goal before COVID. I was going to go to 4 movies a month. I mean, actually be in the theater, watch a movie, even if I was by myself. I just enjoy watching movies. And so I do see a lot of movies. All sorts of different types. We don't need to get into all of that, but there are 2 that really come to mind as I think about today's guest. One is a movie that was a 2014 movie with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, and it's called Edge of Tomorrow. And more or less, Tom Cruise is a soldier in a war with aliens. It's a sci-fi movie, and he's caught in a time loop. And every time he gets killed, he just goes back in time to live it all over again. And in time, that's how he defeats the aliens. He learns a little bit each time, gets a little further along. And spoiler alert, ultimately, it's the movies, it's Hollywood. Ultimately, he prevails. But then that reminds me of another movie, which was a 1993 movie with Bill Murray and Andy McDowell, Groundhog Day. And many people listening probably have seen Groundhog Day. It's kind of embedded in pop culture anymore. People will make references to things that keep happening over and over. It's like Groundhog Day. At least amongst my friends, there's a lot of those sorts of conversations going on where things keep repeating and repeating and repeating. And those are both fun movies. They're entertaining movies, but this is the reality. That's life. That's real life. And that there are people out there. Well, I think to a degree, we all kind of get stuck in these little time loops where we're repeating and we're repeating and we're repeating. Recently, I was connected to our guest today, Molly Brown, and she's a mindset engineer, or the mindset engineer, I should say. And she gets at the root cause of disorganization, procrastination, and people's plateaued results. And when we originally met and spoke, she talked about really 3 loops. I guess that's my term, it wasn't her term, but 3 loops that people get in, or plateaus that people get on. One is income. People kind of get stuck in that income loop or that income plateau. The other might be health. The people out there who, and I don't want to say yo-yo dieting, I think that's part of it, but but people who kind of keep time and again finding themselves in the same place. And then the third thing she'd sort of mentioned was, well, not sort of mentioned, she did mention marriage, and that there are people out there that it's Groundhog Day. They keep marrying the same person, or maybe they might marry the same person that their father married, and the father had a horrible marriage, and just kind of were stuck in these loops. And it's easy to kind of commiserate life and say, well, life's doing this to me. And in reality, it's us doing it to ourselves. Or so Molly will tell us. Right, Molly?
Yes. Good news and bad news, right? I mean, it's maybe a tough pill to swallow, but once you realize how much authority you really do have, you also don't need anybody's permission or help to change it. So.
Yeah. It's I mean, I think once you realize that, this is years ago, I got on this Chinese food thing, right? Hey, Chinese food's got to be good for you. It's like rice and vegetables. This is probably in the 90s. And then I read somewhere in a magazine, this was pre-internet, that Chinese food's horrible for you. And in that moment, I had this moment of despair, because I'm like eating Chinese food 5 days a week, thinking it's good for me. Oh my God, I screwed up. But there was also this moment of, okay, I can fix this, right? I didn't buy a lifetime supply of Chinese food, I'll just stop eating Chinese food, or maybe not quite as often. So it's kind of the same thing. Is you're your good news, bad news is, okay, I've married the same person twice and neither worked out. It's on me. I'm the common denominator. What do I need to fix? So
right. And at that point, or at any point, it's never about the other person. Whether the relationship is your boss, your customer, your employee, your spouse, your children, it's never about the other person in the relationship, because they are, if you think of yourself as a puzzle piece, and as you go out in the world, you're looking to mix with puzzle pieces that fit your puzzle piece. So, and other people who are amorphous to the same degree that you are in trying to be accommodating and being around different kinds of, different people in different scenarios. As you change the shape of your puzzle piece, and as you grow in the confidence of your own identity to hold that shape of the puzzle piece, then there's three possibilities for the puzzle pieces around you. One, it matches the shape that you're holding your boundaries on that shape, and they match, and that's great, and that's going to be a great relationship, whether it's marriage or business, anything. That's going to be a great fit for how you've decided you want to show up in the world. Another possibility is somebody else has their own very rigid boundaries and they don't fit. But since you're not being amorphous anymore, you're not going to try to change yourself to fit around them. And that relationship will quickly dissolve or not even take off. And that saves you a lot of time and heartache in trying to change yourself and change someone else and compromise and find these fits, because you have, an identity that you formed starting in your own head, in your own mind of who you are. And then the third possibility is probably the most likely that you're going to find is you're going to run into other people who haven't done that inner work to define their own boundaries, and they are going to act shape-shiftingly. And so the stronger you are in holding your boundaries in your own loving and ethical way, the people around you are going to shape themselves around you. So you will start to experience people who show up in the way you've led and you've determined that people around you are going to be allowed to be, and really without forcing anyone else to do personal development work or forcing anybody else to change. You're blessing them by giving them the possibility to use the tool set that they already have, which is to shape shift depending on the person next to them. And when they shape shift next to you, they're going to shape shift into something that is good for them, because that is the boundary that you have set. Mm-hmm. And so as you do your own work, you can benefit the people around you without asking anything of them. Because I meet so many people, when I talk about coaching and personal development, they're like, oh, that's so great. And my spouse needs that, and my boss needs that, and my kids need that. And I have no, I'm great. If everybody else would just change around me, I'd be fine, but I can't make anyone else change. And I'm like, well, this is, your shot to do it from you and then allow them to learn just by being in your proximity.
No, you touched on a great point. I forgot to bring it up. You originally mentioned marriage, and all marriage is a relationship, and we have relationships with our clients, with our employees, with our bosses, our coworkers, vendors. We have all these relationships, and they run afoul of the same thing. I know people out there that continue to have the same sorts of clients, and then they're beating their heads against the wall because they're slow pay or don't value what they do. And a friend of mine has a saying. He says, "You get what you expect, and you deserve what you tolerate." So if you're going to tolerate those behaviors, if you're not going to, using your term, you're not going to have that boundary, then you're going to get, people are going to push you. I think back when, as you were talking, I'm thinking back, okay, to my life and my professional life. I remember early on when I first moved out of my home office and had hired somebody to come in and work with me. I was so excited to have somebody work with me. oh, wow, you really want to work with me? I'm going to get to pay you. I'm going to be uber flexible. And I was just, and I don't want to say I got walked all over, but it was taken advantage of. I would come in and my then assistant, however many assistants, this is years ago, I'm not going to be there today for whatever reason, and that just kept happening and happening. And it happened twice, two different people. And I realized, you know what, I need to define what I want. I have to paint the picture, and so then the third person I hired, I just sat him down and just said, here's some tough love. This is what I expect, right? I want to be accommodating to you, but your role is to help me. Your role is not to make my life more difficult. And that was a game changer for me. Just because I had metaphorically put my foot down and said, you know what, this is going to be a good experience, but it's got to be a good experience for me, before it's going to be a good experience for you.
Yeah, and you give the other person then the opportunity to make the commitment to the job, to show up on time, to exercise their discipline, and maybe that's a challenge for somebody. But by holding them accountable for it and insisting on it, you give them the opportunity to grow in that by continuing to let them slide, or by not setting a bar to begin with.
Right.
It doesn't give somebody else the opportunity to really step up, and you never needed to judge them on it. You just give them the opportunity by setting the boundary yourself.
It's funny you mentioned that, because there was a woman that I had hired shortly thereafter. I think there was the third one worked out great. And then the fourth one, I kind of, went through this whole thing, and she lasted a day. She just determined it wasn't for her, which, you know what, I would rather know. I mean, I wasn't happy about it because you go through the whole interview process, but I would rather know now than, playing what I call the cat and mouse game of, hey, I'm not coming into work and I'm taking work home with me, or, whatever it was. And it's like, no, we don't do that here. Now, how do people recognize? You've already said people can, we can see it in everybody else. How do we recognize it for ourselves?
Well, if you're seeing patterns in someone else, if you're seeing problems in someone else, the reason you can see them is they exist in you. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to elaborate on what's going on in the mind there, but maybe test it out and see if you can see somebody else that has a problem with being on time, and it really bothers you, or the things that really bother you in somebody else. Sit there maybe with a journal and a pen, an open sheet of paper, and give yourself just the opportunity to, blameless of you and the other person, be like, hey, is the thing in the other person, does that exist in me somewhere? Is that why it's bothering me? Is that why I can see it so clearly in someone else? Is because it's also in me. And kind of connected to that, once we notice it in ourselves, and we take the responsibility to make changes for it in ourselves, and business is a little different than personal relationships in the way we approach things, not because it's actually different, but in business, we kind of have this requirement that everything must be measurable. We must have metrics that we can track to.
Okay.
And all of the metrics are going to show up after the thinking has been done. We don't have thought metrics. How many times did you think positive things about yourself or about negative things? There's no way to draw that report. So we end up with some other metric of, I had a schedule. Did I keep to my schedule? I was going to do 100 calls this week. Did I do 100 calls this week? I was going to burn this many calories, go to the gym, whatever it was on the outside. And then we try to compare, if we met the metric on the outside or not. But all of the things that we're acting from the place where we hold our beliefs, and our beliefs are what's going to cause those actions. So by the time your thinking actually gets your body moving to take an action, you've lost the place of leverage to make a change. And so if you're trying to make changes at the point where you can measure the metric, it's going to be difficult, and people accept that change is hard. So, and that's true if you're trying to make change at the place where you're measuring the metric. If you can understand the mechanism behind the change and how these feedback loops get set up, is we have a streaming data sources from your 5 physical senses continually dumping data into your mind, into your brain, and you down select from there the data you're going to act on. And the way you down select roughly is you have an internal identity, a program of who you are. This goes way back before the age of 7. So your program might have very similar things to your family of origin, just because that's how and when you got your original program. So of all the streaming data sources that are just continually being dumped into your head, you down select them based off of who do you think you are, and everything else you disregard. Like when I'm out and somebody's speaking Chinese around me, my ear doesn't pick it up because I don't speak Chinese.
Right.
Somebody's speaking English or a topic that I like or know about, I'm going to be able to listen in and do something with that information. So then we down select a very small portion of the real reality and the real potentials and possibilities that there are for us. We down select a very small amount of them, and that's what we act on. And then the actions we're going to take are going to fulfill the identity that down selected the data in the first place. And so if you're trying to make changes after the point of down selection, it's difficult, and you don't really have anywhere to go. You've already blinded yourself to all the things that you want to have. So the rewriting has to happen before that layer of down selection of identity in a really imaginative space that is and seems dislocated from reality. And so just kind of understanding the mechanism of how it happens and why it's important that the work be done there, I think helps people get themselves into that imaginary space and understand the importance of the goal setting work that they're doing unbounded by reality. And it's not a head in the sand or wishful thinking. It's understanding that you're doing that to reshape the identity that's going to down select data for you.
Okay, so our subconscious mind, subconscious programming is really kind of directing which way we're going, and what you're advocating is kind of nudging it to a new place. And obviously that can't be easy. I mean, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it, right? I mean, they would be sending out postcards that, here, just read this postcard. And how long does it take? Is it kind of like a cliff? You get to a point and it just happens, or is it kind of like who's the Greek mythology, Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the hill and then having it come roll back down?
Yeah. So Sisyphus is definitely trying to make the change after the point of down selection. Like, you've already decided to roll a boulder up the hill with your bare hands for eternity. Right. After the point of that decision, you're stuck rolling the boulder up the hill for eternity. Right. So until you make a different decision to do a different thing, you're going to continue doing that thing. Like that example is definitely trying to make the change by changing your actions without changing your thinking. Changing your thinking is going to be more of like a cliff dive or a quantum leap, if you look at it as going up instead of down. And I work with people for 6 months. I wouldn't say it's not hard work to do, but it's not the metrics work that we've associated with building our business. It's not about putting in more hours or getting better marketing or better graphic design. All of the metrics that we're really kind of trained and told are what's going to grow our business. In order to take your eye off that ball and focus on something that's not measurable, takes courage. And every time you zoom out of the activity of your rewriting your goals and your identity, and you zoom out and you then see other people who are doing these marketing activities and SEO, all of that, if you allow that to cause fear in you, it will continually set you back and distract you from doing the work you need to do and get you back just pushing the boulder. So that's where, from understanding the mechanism and thinking, well, there are books. I don't even need to write a book on it. There's so many books about it, but reading a book doesn't change your life. Reading a book and being inspired by, the pages of the book for the period you're reading the book until you close it and you go do something else doesn't get you to do the work. And that's where it turned into coaching. I didn't intend to become a coach. I intended to solve a certain business problem inside the aerospace company I was working at. Figured out this feedback loop is the problem that was happening. And the way to get out of the feedback loop isn't a motivational speech and it's not a book. It's standing with somebody through about 6 months and continuing to argue against the fear that arises in them. If I'm over here designing something in my imagination, that boulder is falling down the hill. And of course, it's an infinite hill and it's going to be there for infinity. That's how the hill is defined. So you can just not worry about it, but you're so used to worrying about it. And it's chemically in the body's used to worrying about it. Like worry is a cocktail of chemicals in the body. And just like if you were to take a handful of chemicals or drink a handful of chemicals every day at the same time, your body would learn to demand those from you. And the same as worry, frustration, anger, excitement, all these things that you feel as emotions in your body are cocktails of chemicals. And your organic body is addicted to the cocktail of chemicals on the schedule that it's used to getting them, to include worry and frustration and anxiety and fear. So to break that chemical addiction to the emotion schedule you've got yourself on, to get yourself on a different emotion schedule, or to have a time for a clear slate to write a different program so you can have a different emotional schedule, turns into coaching to just be with somebody during that process and reassure them of the process and be there to help them talk through the fear. Not for me to just say, so shush, don't fear, do your homework, but to say like, what is the fear coming out? And then we put a magnifying glass on it. Let's stare at that fear. And is that fear real? And you can learn a lot about yourself, about the fears that pop up, and then you clear some and different ones pop up. And you got to go through those layers. And I find about 6 months is what it takes.
Okay. I guess that's a good segue to kind of talk about your business and who are the types of people you're working with? How does that process work? Individual groups, things like that. Floor is yours. Tell us about.
Sure. You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn as Molly Brown or Mindset Engineer. There's a lot less mindset engineers than there are Molly Browns in the world. So that's probably the search term. My website is mindset-engineering.com. And my background is engineering, physics, and chemistry and analysis. And so I tend to speak well and coach well with other people in, analytic or STEM kind of fields, that we hear the benefits of meditation, we hear the benefits of mindfulness and stuff, but some of us, the engineering minded ones of us, really want to know why. Even though it's a really simple thing we could just sit down and do for 20 minutes, it's hard to justify for yourself doing the easy thing until you have some complicated explanation of why is it meaningful. And I needed that for myself. And I went out, it took me about 2 years to understand the science and everything going on in the neurochemistry and the organic, chemistry in the body, to understand that, to satisfy myself. And so when I talk to other people who also have the same questions of like, how can this possibly be? How can my mind be so powerful? How can rewriting an event in my day that actually already happened and it's going to change when I wake up and tomorrow, why does it matter that I play a different scenario out in my head? And I'm like, I'm ready for those questions. Let's dig into that. So people who really want to know why it is that we're doing these things. And I do work with individuals or or teams inside companies. What drove me to this was watching a company try to adopt a digital transformation and change and become data driven, and just watch the struggle there on changing the mentality in the company from making gut decisions to data driven decisions. So I work with teams around things like that inside companies, and I have the technical experience to kind of complement the technical team there. And then I work with individuals who want to be different. They want to exist in the world differently. It's not about having more money, having less weight, having a different marriage. Those things, those measurable things will come. But their focus is being someone different, being the person who has a relationship that is not dramatic, being the person who has a money situation that you don't have to think about money. You have to think about something else. You have to figure out who you are if you're not worrying about money all the time. So there are absolutely business coaches and things that are going to get you quicker results, changing individual metrics if you're looking at those metrics. And that's what's important you to change. The people I'm looking for and working with are people who want to just exist and experience life differently.
Okay. Best way to get a hold of you through LinkedIn, through your website, either or. I mean, I'll get the website in the show notes.
Either or. You can message me on LinkedIn. You can book time on my calendar directly through my website also. Okay.
Mindset-engineer.com, right?
Mindset-engineering.
Thank you. I will get that. I always look these up so I don't screw them up. So don't listen to what I'm saying. Just watch what I do. I won't mess up.
Just click the hyperlink. Just copy and paste.
Yep, that's it. Well, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. This is a good conversation.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.